Dorothy Caldwell, 70 years old, had answered every survey question correctly in the Fast Money round. 5 for 5, 197 points, and was standing at the Family Feud podium with her hands pressed flat against the surface to keep them steady when her teammate Shirley went up and added 41 points, bringing the total to 238, the highest Fast Money score in the show's entire season. Confetti dropped. The board lit up gold. Dorothy's family screamed, and Steve Harvey, who had been clapping and walking toward the podium with his trademark grin, stopped dead in the middle of the stage. Because standing behind the confetti curtain, shaking so hard she had to hold the wall, was a 70-year-old woman named Margaret Booker, who had the same face. Not a similar face, the same face. The same wide-set brown eyes, the same chin that came to a soft point, the same scar above the left eyebrow from a childhood fall neither woman remembered. Steve Harvey looked at Margaret, looked at Dorothy, looked back at Margaret, and sat down on the edge of the stage because his body understood what was happening before his mind could catch up. Two women, born on the same day in the same hospital 70 years ago, separated at 3 days old, raised 900 miles apart, had just been brought to the same stage without either of them knowing the other existed. Steve pressed both hands against his face and cried, before a single word of explanation had been spoken. March 13, 2020, a Friday afternoon in Atlanta. The Caldwell family, Dorothy, her daughter Regina, 44, her granddaughter Aisha, 22, her neighbor and lifelong friend Shirley, 68, and Shirley's daughter Pam, 41, stood at the left podium in sky blue. The competing family, the Tran family from San Diego, David Tran, 45, his wife Michelle, their son Kevin, 23, their daughter Lisa, 20, and David's mother Han, 72, stood at the right podium in red. Dorothy was the oldest contestant that season. She moved slowly, spoke deliberately, and laughed with a full-body commitment that made the audience love her within 30 seconds of introductions. Steve asked her where she was from. "Jackson, Mississippi," she said. "Born and raised, never left." Steve asked what she did before she retired. "Taught 4th grade for 38 years at Pecan Park Elementary. Every one of those children is mine." Steve grinned. 38 years! You must have the patience of a saint." Dorothy looked at him over the top of her glasses and said, "Mr. Harvey, I raised 900 children and 2 of my own. Patience isn't a virtue, it's a survival skill." The audience roared. But the real story hadn't even started yet. Dorothy Caldwell was born on June 6, 1949, at Charity Hospital in New Orleans, Louisiana. She was raised by Etta and Samuel Caldwell in Jackson, Mississippi. They told her she was adopted when she was 11 years old, sitting at the kitchen table on a Saturday afternoon in 1960, while the radio played gospel music in the living room. Samuel said, "You came to us as a gift." Etta said, "We chose you." Dorothy processed the information the way she processed everything, carefully, slowly, with the steady determination that would later define 38 years in a classroom. She asked one question. "Do I have brothers or sisters?" Etta said, "We don't know, baby." That answer sat inside Dorothy for 59 years. What Etta and Samuel didn't know, what nobody knew until a DNA test in 2018 would reveal, was that Dorothy had a twin sister. Identical. Born 7 minutes after her. At Charity Hospital in 1949, their biological mother, a 17-year-old girl named Josephine Thibodeau, had given birth to twin girls and surrendered both. The hospital's adoption records from that era were incomplete, fragmented, and, in some cases, deliberately falsified to protect the identities of birth mothers who were, in 1949 Louisiana, often minors from families that considered an unmarried pregnancy a catastrophic scandal. The twins were separated. Dorothy was placed with the Caldwells in Jackson. Her sister was placed with the Bookers in Baltimore, Maryland. Two families, two cities, 900 miles apart. Neither agency informed the other. Neither family was told a twin existed. The record simply noted two separate, single-infant placements from the same hospital on the same date, filed in different cabinets, in different offices, in different states. Margaret Booker grew up in West Baltimore. Her adoptive parents, Frank and Eunice Booker, raised her alongside their biological son, Frank Jr. Margaret was quiet where Dorothy was outgoing, cautious where Dorothy was bold. But the resemblances that neither woman knew about were startling in their specificity. Both women drank Earl Grey tea. Both women woke at 5:30 a.m. without an alarm and had done so their entire adult lives. Both women taught elementary school, Dorothy for 38 years in Jackson, Margaret for 34 years in Baltimore. Both women married men named James. Both women had exactly 2 children, 1 boy, 1 girl. Both women had a scar above their left eyebrow from a fall in early childhood that their adoptive mothers described identically. She was running and hit the corner of the coffee table. 2 different coffee tables, 2 different living rooms, the same scar. And that wasn't even the part that made Steve cry. In 2018, Regina, Dorothy's daughter, gave her mother a DNA ancestry kit for Christmas. "Mama, let's find out where we come from," Regina said. Dorothy resisted. She was 69. She had made her peace with not knowing. But Regina persisted, and Dorothy took the test in January 2019 because refusing her daughter anything was a skill she had never developed. 6 weeks later, a match appeared on the screen. A 100% sibling match. In Baltimore, Maryland. The profile said, Margaret B. Dorothy stared at the screen. Regina stared at the screen. Then Dorothy closed the laptop and didn't open it again for 3 months. "I was afraid," Dorothy told Cheryl, the Family Feud production coordinator, during the pre-show intake interview. "I was 69 years old. I'd lived my whole life as one person. And suddenly there was another one of me out there. What if she didn't want to know me? What if she was angry? What if she looked at me and saw a stranger?" Dorothy paused. "What if she looked at me and saw herself? I didn't know which scared me more." Regina contacted Margaret through the DNA platform in April 2019. Margaret, who had taken her own test 2 years earlier at the suggestion of her son Jerome, had seen the match and had also been too afraid to reach out. 2 70-year-old women sat in 2 different cities, staring at the same match on the same platform, both too terrified to send the first message. Regina broke the deadlock. She wrote to Jerome, Margaret's son. Jerome called Regina. Regina called Margaret. Margaret picked up the phone and heard a stranger's voice say, "Miss Margaret, my name is Regina Caldwell. My mother's name is Dorothy. She was born on June 6, 1949, at Charity Hospital in New Orleans." The line was quiet for 12 seconds. Then Margaret said, "So was I." They didn't meet, not yet. They talked on the phone, 3 times a week, then every day, then twice a day for 11 months. They discovered the tea. They discovered the 5:30 alarm. They discovered the husbands named James. They discovered the scar. Each discovery was a detonation, small, precise, and devastating in its implications. Because every shared habit was evidence that their separation had not erased whatever invisible thread connected them. They were afraid to meet in person. 11 months of phone calls, and neither woman could bring herself to say, "Let's meet." Because a phone call can be hung up. A face cannot be unseen. And both women knew, without saying it, that seeing each other's face would make the 70-year absence real in a way that voices alone could not. Steve would later call what happened next the most important moment of his career. Regina and Jerome, the children, planned it. They contacted the Family Feud production team. They explained the situation. The producers arranged for Dorothy's family to compete normally, with no knowledge that Margaret would be in the building. Margaret and Jerome flew from Baltimore to Atlanta the night before the taping. Margaret was placed backstage in a separate green room. She watched the game on a monitor. She watched her twin sister, a woman she had spoken to 1,000 times but never seen, answer questions, laugh at Steve's jokes, and touch the podium with hands that were identical to her own. Margaret watched Dorothy's hands on the monitor and held her own up to the screen, and the production assistant standing beside her later said it was the most quietly devastating thing she had ever witnessed. Dorothy won. The confetti dropped. The celebration erupted. And then Steve noticed the production assistant waving from stage left. He walked over. The assistant whispered something in his ear. Steve's face changed. Not dramatically, not the way it changes during the big emotional moments, but in a way that was more fundamental. His face changed the way a person's face changes when they realize they are standing in the middle of something holy. He walked back to center stage. He didn't go to Dorothy. He went to the center. He stood there for a moment, collecting himself in a way the audience could see. Chest expanding, eyes blinking rapidly, hands flexing at his sides. "Dorothy," Steve said. His voice was already unsteady. "I need to tell you something, and I need you to trust me." Dorothy adjusted her glasses. "Mr. Harvey, I've trusted strangers with worse." On June 6, 1949, Steve said, at Charity Hospital in New Orleans, a girl named Josephine gave birth to twins, 2 baby girls. They were separated at 3 days old. One was sent to Jackson, Mississippi. Steve looked at Dorothy. She had gone perfectly still. The other was sent to Baltimore, Maryland. Dorothy's hand moved to her chest. Not her heart, above it, to the hollow of her throat, where breath begins. "What are you saying to me? You have a sister, Dorothy, a twin sister. She was born 7 minutes after you. She's a retired school teacher. She drinks Earl Grey tea. She wakes up at 5:30 every morning. She has a scar above her left eyebrow." Steve's voice broke. "And she's standing behind that curtain." Dorothy's legs gave out. Regina caught her. Aisha grabbed the other arm. Shirley was crying. The audience was crying. Steve was crying so hard he had to turn away from the camera for a moment to breathe. "Dorothy," Steve said, turning back, his face streaming, "I need you to look at the curtain." The curtain parted. Margaret Booker stepped onto the Family Feud stage. She was shaking. She was crying. She was wearing a sky-blue blouse, the same color as Dorothy's family shirts, though no one had coordinated it. She walked the way a woman walks when every step is bringing her closer to the answer to a question she has carried for 70 years. Do I have brothers or sisters? The studio fell completely silent. Dorothy saw her. The recognition was not intellectual. It was cellular. Dorothy's body recognized Margaret before her brain could form a thought. Her hand flew to her mouth, then to the scar above her left eyebrow, then to Margaret's face, still 15 feet away. Dorothy took one step, then another. Then she was moving faster than a 70-year-old woman should be able to move. and Margaret was moving too, and they met at center stage, the exact spot where Steve had been standing, and they collided. Not an embrace, a collision. Two bodies that had shared a womb 7 decades ago slamming into each other with a force that made Dorothy's glasses fly off and Margaret's purse hit the floor. And neither woman noticed because they were holding each other's faces. Both hands mirrored. Each woman holding the other's jaw, looking at her own eyes in someone else's head. Dorothy's fingers found the scar above Margaret's left eyebrow, and Margaret's fingers found Dorothy's, and they traced them at the same time, in the same motion, like a choreography that had been encoded before birth and was only now being performed. "You look like me," Dorothy whispered. "You look like me," Margaret said at the same instant. They said it simultaneously. The audience heard it as one voice. Steve was sitting on the edge of the stage. He had not stood up. He could not stand up. His elbows were on his knees, and his head was in his hands, and his body was shaking with sobs that the boom mic captured and that the internet would replay 340 million times. A camera operator was crying so hard she had to hand her rig to a grip. The lighting crew had stopped adjusting. The stage manager was sitting on the floor, holding her clipboard against her face. The crew of Family Feud had, for the second time that season, entirely ceased to function. But Steve wasn't done. He stood. It took effort. He wiped his face with both palms and walked to the two women, still holding each other's faces at center stage. "Let me tell you something," he said, and his voice was so raw it barely carried. "I wrote a goodbye letter to my family once. I was ready to quit. Quit living, quit trying, quit everything. And the only thing that stopped me was a voice that said, 'You don't know what's waiting for you.' I didn't know. I couldn't see it." He looked at Dorothy. "You waited 70 years. 70 years of not knowing. And she was there the whole time, drinking the same tea, waking at the same hour, teaching the same children, carrying the same scar." Steve's voice dropped to a whisper. "Some things wait for you, even when you don't know they exist." He asked a producer for a phone. He dialed the number for Harmony Hills Assisted Living in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. A nurse answered. Steve asked to speak with Josephine Thibodeau. The line was quiet. The nurse said, "She's 87. She has good days and not so good days. Today is a good day." The nurse brought the phone to Josephine. "Miss Josephine," Steve said, "my name is Steve Harvey. I'm standing next to two women right now. They were born on June 6, 1949, at Charity Hospital." The line went silent. They found each other, and they're together. Josephine's voice came through the speaker, thin, trembling, 87 years old, carrying the weight of a decision made at 17. "Both of them?" she said. "Both my girls?" "Both your girls," Steve said. The sound Josephine made was not a word. It was 70 years of sealed grief rupturing through an 87-year-old throat. Dorothy grabbed the phone. Margaret pressed her ear beside Dorothy's. Two daughters listened to the mother they had never known cry their existence back into her body. Steve faced camera 2. "Everyone watching at home right now, there are people in this world who belong to each other and don't know it. They're drinking the same tea. They're waking at the same hour. They're carrying the same scars. And the only thing separating them is a piece of paper filed in the wrong cabinet 70 years ago. If you've ever wondered, if you've ever had the test and been afraid to look at the results, look. Because what's waiting might be the person who's been waiting for you." He awarded both families the full $20,000. He paid the Tran's share from his own pocket. David Tran crossed the stage, shook Dorothy's hand, then Margaret's, and said, My mother Han came to this country alone. She didn't find her family for 30 years. She understands. Han, 72, walked to Dorothy and Margaret, took both their hands, and held them without speaking. 3 women, 3 separations, 1 stage. Steve announced the creation of the Josephine Foundation, seeded with $350,000 from the Steve Harvey Foundation, the largest single seed in the show's history, dedicated to reuniting families separated by closed adoptions, funding DNA testing, search services, legal assistance for unsealing records, and reunion counseling for birth parents, adoptees, and siblings. Dorothy and Margaret were named co-chairs. Steve looked at the 2 women, still side by side, still holding hands, the scars above their eyebrows aligned like parentheses around a sentence 70 years in the making, and said 5 words. God kept the other copy. The clip went live that evening. Within 48 hours, 89 million views. The fastest any Family Feud clip had ever reached that number. Within 2 months, 340 million views across all platforms. The hashtag #TheOtherCopy trended in 61 countries for 17 days. Adoption registries across the country reported an unprecedented surge in DNA test submissions. The Josephine Foundation received $31.2 million in its first year, the most of any foundation created on the show, and facilitated 2,100 reunions between siblings separated by closed adoptions. Dorothy and Margaret visited Josephine in Baton Rouge 3 weeks after the taping. Josephine was in a wheelchair. She was lucid. She looked at them, at the faces she had last seen at 3 days old, now 70 years old, both wearing glasses, both with the scar, and she held one hand from each daughter and said, "I've been dreaming 2 faces my whole life. I thought I was making them up." She wasn't. In a 2022 interview with Oprah, Steve was asked which Family Feud moment stayed with him the longest. He didn't hesitate. "The twins," he said, "because every other moment on that show, the people knew what they were missing. They knew they were struggling. They knew they needed help. Dorothy didn't know. She didn't know Margaret existed. She asked one question when she was 11 years old. Do I have brothers or sisters? And nobody could answer it. And she carried that question for 59 years, silently, without complaint. And then one day, the answer walked out from behind a curtain wearing the same face. Oprah asked what Steve thought about when he saw them touch each other's scars. Steve closed his eyes. "I thought, some things are written so deep that 70 years and 900 miles can't erase them. The T, the alarm, the scar, the hands. That's not coincidence, Oprah. That's design." Today, Dorothy Caldwell is 74. Margaret Booker is 74, 7 minutes younger and never tired of reminding Dorothy. They live 4 blocks apart in Jackson, Mississippi. Margaret relocated from Baltimore in 2021. They have breakfast together every morning at 5:30 a.m. Earl Grey. They sit on the same side of the table. Their children, Regina, Jerome, and the others, have merged into a single sprawling family that gathers at Dorothy's house every Thanksgiving, every Christmas, every June 6th. Josephine Thibodeau died peacefully in November 2022 at 89 years old. Both daughters were at her bedside. She was holding one hand from each. Her last words, spoken to a nurse who asked if she needed anything, were, "I have everything." A woman sat at a kitchen table at age 11 and asked, "Do I have brothers or sisters?" Nobody could answer. 59 years later, a curtain opened on a game show stage, and the answer walked out wearing her face. They touched each other's scars. They said the same words at the same time. And a mother in a nursing home in Baton Rouge. 87 years old, 70 years of silence, a decision made at 17 that she could never take back. Heard two voices on a phone and said, "Both my girls?" Some questions take a lifetime to answer, and some answers, when they finally arrive, are worth every year of the asking. If this story reminded you that the people who belong to you might still be out there, waiting, carrying the same marks, keeping the same hours, subscribe to this channel right now. Turn on that notification bell. We tell these stories every week because somewhere, somebody is about to turn around and see the face they've been looking for their whole life. Subscribe now. The next story might be the one that makes you take the test.